when the church, when we believe as Christians, right, that the Spirit of truth guides us into all truth, that means the church has the authority to recognize truth. And when it recognizes truth, it incorporates that truth into its worldview. Let me give you an example.
Yeah, so when the church advocated incorrect truths in the medieval times, what's going on there?
So it was ignorant. And in all, because I'm going to give you a living example. Yeah, a living example would be about slavery. It's there in the Old Testament. It's there in the New Testament. But Christians have always known from New Testament times that slavery is something to be abolished. It's not something that was abolished. Christ said, I have come to set the captives free. He's talking about slaves, right? So the church, insofar it was able, would set slaves free, but it couldn't go against the whole economy any more than you and I could suddenly stop using money.
Okay.
Right? But as time goes forward, the church learned there were other ways to organize economy. And as it learned other ways of organizing economy, it incorporated those into its understanding of truth so that it could then live out the fullness of the gospel, which was to abolish slavery.
So you say, that's interesting. You're saying there's a command in the gospel which says, instructs the abolition of slavery.
Yeah, Christ himself says, I have come to set the captives free. He's quoting Isaiah. Isaiah is talking about captives. Who were the captives in Isaiah's time?
The Jewish people, weren't they?
No, they were prisoners of war. They were slaves.
Okay.
Yeah? So when you defeated someone in battle, you took them as slaves.
Yeah.
So when Christ says, I have come to set the captives free, he is saying that this very words that Isaiah gives in prophecy are now fulfilled in him speaking.
What do you know roughly what I'm curious about that.
That's in Luke.
The context?
That's in Luke. So the context is Christ goes into a synagogue, and as a guest in a synagogue, he has the right to read from the Torah scroll. He chooses where he reads from, and he reads from the prophecy of Isaiah. And in the prophecy of Isaiah it says that I have come to set the captives free. And then he places the scrolls down and he sits down, and everybody's waiting for him to teach. And he says, in your hearing, these words have been fulfilled. So in other words, he's saying that now has come the time when the captives, now has come the time in the Messianic age where the captives, the slaves, shall be set free. And this is just another...
Take that literally, like you're saying, if you take the Quran literally, if I take that literally as well, it didn't happen for hundreds of years.
Actually, no, it happened almost immediately. Christians started setting captives free. Christians say... I'll give you some examples.
The New Testament.
The history of the church isn't just the New Testament.
I agree with that.
So in the new,
you're saying immediately.
I will give you. I'm literally going to do that. Going to do that.
£5,000. But you're looking at least a gap of about 100 and odd years, a century at least, isn't it? My only point is, you take the text literally, and you take anything Jesus said literally, it too will become nonsensical. That's my only point in all of this. I agree with a lot of what you're saying.
Right. Bear with us. Bear with us 1 second.
I'll go for it.
Right. It might take me a minute. Thing about Google, as you know, it just pulls up everything that's related to the words.
Because the reason I don't think it happened literally is because Paul himself commands masters and slaves.
I know the church history. It did happen.
Can you name the...
Yeah, I'm going to. Just take me a second to find them.
Sorry, okay.
Where is Eve in the Quran? What surah? What ayah is the name Eve? Allah in the Quran? Show me. I'll give you £5,000 right now.
You got a rich friend there.
Show me. Show me. Otherwise, shut up and keep quiet. Show me.
Right.
Show me.
Bear with us.
Show me the name Eve in the Quran. Eve.
Accept all.
Where is
No, I've got earlier ones than this. I mean, I've got websites that are showing me
I
saints.
agree that saints would have done that.
Saint Vitalis of Gaza in 625 AD.
Again, yeah,
Well, I mean, that's the end of the classical period, so it's still within the classical period.
but what my only point is, taking it literally makes Christ, God from you saying, a liar.
No, it
Taking
doesn't.
Literally.
No.
Because I mean, if he
No.
ushers the Messiah in the kingdom,
He says, I have come to set captives free. It doesn't say how he does it.
which captive did he say? Literally.
No, one second. No. Even literally, it still
Okay.
works. Because, one second, Christ said, I have come to set the captives free. It doesn't say how he does it, does it?
I agree.
And the way that he set captives free was to inspire his followers to set captives free.
Great interpretation. I agree with that.
Well, it
But
goes with the text, and I'm taking it literally.
No, you're not taking it literally.
Yes, I'm taking it literally.
It would mean that Christ himself
Yes.
would free people.
I have come to set captives free.
Right.
And he does.
And he does do that, though.
No, he does. He sets us.
dies
He
3 days
sets us
later.
free from slavery to sin.
I love that.
He sets us
Wait,
free.
That's brilliant.
He sets us free from the dominion of the devil.
I agree with all of that interpretation.
Great.
But you're not taking it literally.
No, I am
And
taking it
you're
literally.
being intelligent doing
I'm
that.
I'm taking it literally. Christ said, I've come to set the captives free. He doesn't define the captives, and he doesn't define how he sets them free. Which means
Wait, you earlier said captives were
which means that when the church, inspired by the Holy Spirit that guides them into all truth, reads the words where Christ said, I have come to set the captives free, the church understands that it must liberate slaves, and it does. And there is a great history of the church setting slaves free.
I probably will agree with that, but let's rewind 10 minutes ago when you said in the context, I have set captives free. You refer to that as slaves, i.e. prisoners of war. Now, you've morphed it into more than that, and I agree with that. Paul talks about slave and don't be a slave to sin. I completely get it, but you did not take it literally. All I would ask is you just apply the same common sense to the Quranic text as well. That's my point of view.
So hold on one second. Except that isn't what I did. Even in our conversation, I limited it to those things that are concerned with divine stuff, divine religion. The Quran is making the claim, not me. The Quran is making the claim, not you. The Quran is making the claim, not Muhammad, that it gives a detailed exposition of all things. And I'm pointing at the inconsistency of the Ahmadiyya, because you criticize all the other Muslims in the park for accepting hadiths that talk about killing apostates,
Correct.
because you say it's contradicted directly by the Quran.
Correct.
But the Quran contradicts the idea of hadiths in their entirety. In their entirety.
What I would say to that again would be Muhammad, many times when revelations came to him, he would explain those texts.
Go on.
If he had your understanding, he would not be explaining anything. All he would simply say is, it's a detailed exposition, shut up, take it whatever it is. But no, he didn't do that. He did not have your interpretation. It's your interpretation. I will criticize it, but you're entitled to it. But Muhammad himself disagreed with you. He did not understand that verse to be like that.
Right.
He explained the Quran in many places. If he took your interpretation, he would not explain it. He would say it's detailed enough.
And here's my final reason. Let's draw this to a conclusion.
We're going.
Because inspired by Christ's teachings about setting the captives free, King Ethelbert of Kent was a Christian king of Anglo-Saxon Kent who issued a law code called the Laws of Ethelbert, which abolished the practice of slavery in its entirety. In its entirety. This is before Muhammad instituted slavery in the Quran.
What year is this, sorry? King?
This is in 590 to 616. So that's before Muhammad died in 632. He was contemporaneous to Muhammad. So while Muhammad was instituting slavery inside the Quran, Jesus inspired a king of Kent in England to abolish slavery completely.
Let me answer that. Let me answer that. Firstly, my only criticism when you said Christ saying I've come to abolish slavery is if we take the literal reading, it becomes nonsensical. If you take the expanded meaning, the non-literal, whatever you said is completely true, and I commend you for that. However, to say that Muhammad came to institute slavery, the Quran has so many instructions about freeing slaves.
Great, so he does institute it then?
Freeing the slaves?
No, he institutes slavery because
yes.
where is the Quranic injunction to abolish slavery? Show me.
There's many, no, there isn't.
There isn't, exactly. But Muhammad, wait 1 second, but Muhammad gives laws about how you treat slaves.
Correct.
Right, so he has instituted slavery in Islam. There are rules about how you treat slaves, but there is no command to abolish slavery.
I'll answer that. He went within the time, the norms of the time.
He went with the norms of the time, I agree.
He went with them. Now, in times of war, you took in prisoners of war,
Yep.
you became slaves.
Yep.
Yep. But throughout the Quran and throughout, he himself said, treat them as you treat yourself.
1 second. Yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
Treat them as you treat themselves, as yourself. That's not in the Quran, but he said that himself. But then throughout the Quran, there's so many passages that talk about freeing slaves. It's part of our pillars of Islam. Zakat is freeing slaves. It's so commended. It's more commended.
Great, I accept that. I accept that as a Muslim, you have an institution of slavery in the Quran in which you are instructed to free slaves.
Yes.
But you are also instructed in the Quran that you can take slaves. Remember,
Under certain circumstances.
those that your right hands
Yes.
possess.
Under certain
And he said that this was the norms of the time. And he was right. It was the norms of the time, except in the Christian world. Because in the Christian world, in the 7th century, not only was there no slavery, but where there was slavery, Christians were abolishing it. Right? And I have given you an example. King Ethelbert of Kent,
In
560.
England. Now, hold on.
Yes, one king of England was better than Muhammad because one king of England abolished slavery at the time Muhammad was instituting slavery.
But you said Christianity.
Which is better, for setting slaves free or taking slaves captives?
Setting slaves free is better.
Right, 1 second. King Ethelbert abolished all slavery. On the question of slavery, is King Ethelbert better than Muhammad?
Let me go into that.
By your logic.
No, I want to go into who's king.
Let's do this, step one.
No, king who?
King Ethelbert of Kent. You need to look up the laws of Ethelbert. So you all heard him say that setting slaves free is better than taking slaves captives. King Ethelbert set slaves free. Muhammad took slaves as captives. According to his logic, who is the better ruler? The Christian King Ethelbert or Muhammad?
That's one thing he just did.
There you go. And who inspired King Ethelbert to set the captives free? Jesus. By saying these words, I have come to set the captives free.
Isaiah 61:1.
Exactly. So in other words...
No, it's like you're taking one example.
No, I have others.
No. King Ethelbert had 500 years. Christianity had 500 years until from that instruction, until one king gave the instruction. But before that, they had 500 years in which they had power. They had the entire European continent, yet none of them took that as text. They
Wrong.
had 500 years to instruct.
Wrong.
What, I'll take
Wrong.
an example.
I'll give you other examples.
History, there were so many. There's instructions by inspired Paul. If that instruction was to free the captives, surely Paul, who had authority over his churches, would have instructed the masters to free their slaves. He would have instructed Philemon to free his slave. He pleaded to him, but he didn't instruct him. Paul does not understand that text as you did. Now with Islam, we have it. It takes time. You can't, like you said, abolish it straight away. You know that as well as I do. So
I'm going to let you finish.
It takes a bit of time.
I'm going to let you finish.
I've said my piece. I'm not going to waffle on.
Okay, so the point is he's wrong. He's wrong. The fact is, slavery was abolished in the Roman world by the 6th century.
I said that.
It was gone
I agree.
before Islam. It was gone in the Christian world.
Let me check that out.
You know who introduced slavery to Europe again after the Christians had abolished it? Islam, when they invaded in the 7th century. They reintroduced slavery to Spain and Portugal. They were the ones that reintroduced the idea of slavery. Let me give you another example.
I want you to back up.
Let me give you another example.
No, you said slavery.
One second, let me give you another example. King Louis of France, 1289 to 1316. So whilst the Islamic world was rampantly raping and taking slaves across the entire world, King Louis of France, known as Louis the Quarrelsome, abolished the practice of slavery in France in 1315. This was accomplished through the Ordonnance de Louis X, which declared that all slaves in France were freed by royal decree.
When was that, sorry?
That was in 1289 to 1316.
That's 1,000 years after. It takes time.
And it's still better than Islam.
It takes time.
Has the Muslim world abolished slavery?
What we talk? Well, there's no slaves in the Muslim.
Yes, there are.
I would disagree
Yes,
with
there
that.
are.
The Quran says.
Where can I buy a black slave today?
God knows.
In the Islamic world.
Well, in the same.
If I go to Malawi, if I go to Chad, I can buy a black child as a slave from a Muslim slave market.
Wait.
Who introduced slavery in the Middle East again?
In the same.
In the 21st century.
In the same country.
ISIS.
I would be. We don't need to talk about ISIS. I'll be killed there quicker than you will. Okay?
Yeah, I know you
know
will.
that as well. So, it takes time. Now, it does. The Quran. You can't say that the Quran advocates it. The Quran explicitly says slavery is only be taken in times of warfare. I cannot go ahead and take somebody as a slave.
So you can take someone as a slave?
In a state of warfare.
There you go. So you can take someone as a slave today.
Just like a prisoner of war.
So if there was a war,
there is a prisoner.
So if there is a war,
prisoners of war,
you are saying you can take slaves today.
And the prisoner, if they are taken prisoners,
they can be slaves. Yes.
And
there you go. And you're doing that because of Muhammad's teaching.
Let me finish.
Thank you.
Let me finish a bit. Okay, let me finish a bit.
Yeah.
In times of war under Islam, yes, you can. How should you treat them? Nothing like the prisoners of war in this country. But you want to treat them like yourself. Feed them like yourself. Clothe them like yourself.
But not.
Let me finish.
Go on.
Have them like yourself. But throughout the Quran, it is advocated so strongly everywhere is to free them, free them, free them. So that is a brilliant instruction. It is more humane than anything else. Show me how prisoners of war in Christian nations, the prisoners of war were treated just like their masters, were treated with the same food, the same clothing, as instructed by Muhammad himself and throughout his companions.
Brilliant. So what you all heard here today was that the Ahmadiyya Muslim is saying that you can own another human being as a slave.
I said what I said.
That's what he just said.
I didn't say that.
That is what you just said.
A prisoner of war is the same.
It's a slave.
What's the
the
difference?
one that your right hands possess.
What is
That's
it?
what the Quran says.
What is
One
it?
second. You asked me to give you saints from the Roman classical period who set slaves free. So here's a list. Saint Melania set free. Look it up. Saint Melania set free 8,000 slaves.
How many?
8,000 slaves. Saint Ovidius of Gaul set free 500 slaves. Saint Chromatius, a Roman prefect under the Emperor Diocletian, set free 1,400 slaves. Saint Hermas, under the prefect under Trajan, the Emperor Trajan, set free 1,200 slaves. Saint Augustine encouraged the clergy in his rule to set slaves free. Saint Constantine instituted the death penalty for those who took slaves. Saint Justinian abolished all the laws hindering the freeing of slaves. Saint Lactantius, in his divine institution, stated, "No slaves, there are no slaves in God's eyes." Saint Chrysostom stated, "In Jesus Christ there is no slave, and therefore it is not necessary to have one. Buy them, teach them, and release them." In homily 40 on 1 Corinthians 10, Saint Patrick in Ireland condemned the slave trade. Christians fought in the Islamic world to abolish the slave trade. The Barbary pirates only stopped taking slaves in the 17 and 1800s when the British, the French and the Americans bond them into submission. That is what stopped slavery. And as you heard, he was saying Muhammad instituted slaves and you could own slaves like the Barbary pirates in times of war.
Let me say what I said. All the examples you've given are centuries after Jesus' instruction. Paul, let me say my piece. Paul did not agree with any of that. He himself instructed masters to treat their slaves well. He did not tell them to free them at all. If you want to talk about slavery examples, why don't we look at the Crusades, where Christians came, and yes, they didn't take slavery, they just destroyed and annihilated all the men, women, and children in Jerusalem. And what did Salahuddin do? A Muslim. He freed the entire nation. So I can pickpocket examples as well, where Muslims have done great and freed thousands and millions of slaves as well. We can both play that card. But you've given me one text in your book which fellow people have not agreed with that. Paul has not agreed with your interpretation. Yet with us, I'm saying a prisoner of war
is a slave.
Is a slave, which is the same thing.
Is a slave. There you go.
But we are not to treat them like a prisoner of war. We are to treat them as we treat ourselves. We are to feed them with the same food. They sit with us. They're clothed like us.
But you own them.
Like us. We free them.
No,
Just like
no.
Wait.
You free them under certain circumstances as penalties for certain crimes.
No, we are instructed to free them all the time.
But
charity, all the time.
And this is why the Islamic world has never had an abolition movement.
I don't care about what the Islamic world, the Islamic world will kill me.
I know.
Let's stick with the Quranic text.
The Quranic text says that you can take slaves. Can you trade your slaves?
Wait.
Did Muhammad trade slaves?
Wait.
Did Muhammad trade slaves?
What is the difference between a prisoner of war and a slave?
Did Muhammad trade slaves?
Yes.
Yes. There you go. Muhammad traded slaves.
Let me ask you. This country goes into war. They take prisoners of war. What's the difference between that and a slave? You tell me.
Right. Here's the difference.
Go on.
We have a tradition of taking prisoners of war. But
how did you treat them?
No, 1 second.
Sorry.
But when the war ended, the prisoners are released and allowed to go back home. No, 1 second.
I don't agree with that.
No, 1 second. Now, you mentioned the Crusades.
Go on.
You mentioned the Crusades. The Crusades were a response to 7 centuries of Islamic aggression. They were a necessary response to Islamic violence and Islamic invasions of Christian land. Now, what do you mean an example? Muslims invaded Egypt, they invaded Morocco, Algeria, Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, the southern coast of Dalmatia, Armenia, Turkey, Syria, Palestine, Israel, all before the first crusade. No, also you lied. Because you said the Christians just went in there and destroyed everything. Yes, there are some examples of that, but the reality is the Crusader states would never have succeeded for 200 years if they had just decimated the local population. The reality is that the vast majority of the citizens of the Crusader states were the people that were living there before the Latins arrived. And even Muslims themselves said that the Muslims inside the Crusader states were treated better by their Crusader overlords than the Muslims in the Muslim world.
I don't agree with that.
That is literally what Muslim travelers have said.
Can you show me, wait, are you denying the fact that when the Crusades invaded Jerusalem, took control of it, that there was not a massacre of men, women and children? Are you denying that?
The massacre is, historians believe that the massacre is exaggerated. Dr. Schrader, there you go, I gave you an historian immediately.
What?
Which historians? Dr. Schrader. Also,
A Christian? I don't know, you tell me.
yes, she's a Christian.
So against
Historians,
all the other historians,
yes, historians
disagree.
Shall I tell you why they believe that the massacre is exaggerated? Because the stories about the massacres talk about blood going up above the ankles of the Crusaders.
That's an example, that's an
Of
exaggeration.
course, there you go. It's an exaggeration.
Of course, you're not going to have rivers
Thank
of blood,
you.
but
Exactly, it was an exaggeration.
But the massacre.
Am I denying massacres? No.
Right, so there
but
you go.
what I'm
That's
saying
right.
is,
I didn't
your
lie, did I?
your characterization.
You said
Yes,
I lied.
it was a lie. Your characterization of the Crusades is entirely false.
They were massacres of men, women, and children.
And you're saying
when
Muslims
Christians-
never did that?
No, I'm saying I'll give you.
What about what
you can
Muhammad
pick
did at the
examples.
Kaaba?
You can pick examples.
What did Muhammad do at the Kaaba? What did he do to the Jews at the Kaaba?
Which Kaaba? What does that mean?
So when he defeated the Jews of the Kaaba, the Banu Quraysh, what did he do to the Jews? He allowed 900 of them to be massacred.
Banu
So here you are.
Banu Qurayza.
What, the Qurayza?
Sorry.
They were massacred, were they not?
Men were massacred.
They were massacred. So he's condemning the Crusades, which means that he should condemn Muhammad. Was Muhammad wrong?
Let me answer.
Was Muhammad
No,
wrong? There you go, the double
Let me
standards.
example. Let me. I am comparing an example where the Crusades, the Christians, just like how God and Jesus instructed Joshua to kill men, women, children, rip out babies from womb. That is explicitly forbidden in Islam. Yes, warring men were killed at the time of Muhammad.
The victory, you know.
But the women, the children, they were not massacred.
Yeah,
like the
they were
Christians-
taken as slaves
like the
and
Christians
raped.
Wait, where?
Yes.
Show me
Yes.
Give me an example.
So look, right. So firstly, let's just correct something.
Go on.
Notice that from his logic, Muhammad is no better than a Crusader.
I didn't say that at all.
The Crusaders
way
massacred
better.
and Muhammad massacred.
Muhammad killed
Muhammad
fighting men.
allowed 900 captives
Fighting men.
to be massacred after the Muslims had won.
Fighting men.
The war was over.
Say fighting
The
men.
war was over.
But say,
Was the
fighting
war
men.
over?
We
There you go. Yes, they had been defeated. So these were 900 unarmed men. 900 men who were not fighting. And Muhammad allowed them to be massacred.
Okay, let me answer that.
No, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm not finished.
Okay, I will.
I know I'm not
after that,
finished.
yeah?
No, ladies and gentlemen. What happened to the women and children? I'll tell you what happened. Muhammad allowed them to be taken as slaves. One of those women was taken by one of the companions of the Prophet as a sex slave. And Muhammad heard about this and heard about her beauty and commanded that this sex slave should be given to him.
Can you name her? Sorry, I forget.
I will name her in a short second, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, within a few days of just seeing her mother, her father and her brother and her husband killed, she was having to have sex with Muhammad himself. How many of you women here, when the people that have just killed your father, your brother, your cousins, would want to have sex with the man that just had them killed? None of you would. Why? Because it ain't normal to do that. But Muhammad had sex with a woman who was in mourning for her entire family, and the Muslims themselves were so scared of what this woman might do to Muhammad that one of them stood outside of the tent with a sword to come and protect Muhammad in case the woman tried to kill him. Does that sound like consent, or does that sound like rape?
Let me respond. Okay, so you talk about Banu Qurayza. Give me a second. What happened? There were 3 tribes. What Bob doesn't do is give you the context of the whole thing. Gives you one little snippet, forgets the whole historical context. There were 3 Jewish tribes in Medina. All 3 of them betrayed Muhammad. The first one betrayed him. What did Muhammad do? He told them, he exiled them. Get out. He let them alone. The second one, the Banu Nadir, what did he do? He let them free. All of them. What did they do? They went to the Meccans, his enemy, incited hatred, caused a war. They came back and fought against Muhammad. Third time, what happened? Yes, Muhammad said, that's enough. I can't deal with you people. I let you go, you come and fight me again. No, I will now, men will be killed because they constantly broke their treaties many times. They attempted his assassination twice. Obviously, he's not going to let them free. He killed the men, he took the woman as prisoner. That is far better than what Jesus and God and Yahweh instructs Joshua. When Joshua took over the cities, he put to the sword men, women, children, animals. Babies were slaughtered under the command of Yahweh -- Jesus, whom Bob who follows. So take this in context. I explained really well all the other stuff about slavery. I think God, I'm not sure where he's getting all these sources from.
Can I say something?
No. We're having a conversation. I'll debate you in a second. I want to finish my debate with him. No. 1 second. No. Me and you. No, I'm not giving him. I'll debate you second. No, I will debate you later. I'll debate you later. I want to finish my conversation with him. Right? So let's just be clear, ladies and gentlemen. Because the thing is, there is a lot of ignorance about Christianity. Most people in English culture don't know the first thing about Christianity. So they hear about a story from the Old Testament and they don't understand how Christians use that story. Christians believe in a covenantal system. Christians believe that God established a new covenant in Christ. And in that new covenant, he will not be able to show me any actions of Jesus that match the actions that I am condemning about Muhammad's behavior. And I have the story of Safiyyah here. Ladies and gentlemen, the faith that I am calling you to is the faith of the new covenant, not the old covenant. And in that faith, ladies and gentlemen, there is no action where Christ rapes a woman that he's had as a slave.
No way.
But Muhammad rapes a woman that he has just taken as a slave. Muslims uphold Muhammad as the example to follow. Christians say follow the example of Jesus. And just as earlier in this debate, he admitted that it is better to set slaves free than to take them as slaves, and therefore Christ and his followers who set slaves free are all better than Muhammad. Well, I would suggest to you that it is better not to take slaves and rape them than it is to take slaves and rape them, and that is what Muhammad did to Safiyyah. Remember, her entire family had died. He's throwing out this Old Testament passage because he can't put a scratch on Jesus. But I'm not appealing to the prophets before Muhammad. I'm talking about Muhammad himself and saying Muhammad is a worse example than King Ethelbert, a worse example than King Louis, a worse example than Saint Ovidius, all of whom were inspired by Jesus Christ. Go on.
Okay, so fair enough. Jesus did in the past advocate the murder of men, women, and children. In the past, he changes it in Joshua. He says it very clearly to Joshua. He instructs it very much. But then what happens in the end times over here as well? Your same Jesus will come, bring the sword, and he'll annihilate everybody in the book of Revelations. Would he not? So there is no concept of a peaceful, there is in his time where he had no power. But it's different. When you have power, then things will change. Regarding Safiyyah and this prisoner of war, we've gone through that many times. In fact, when you read the whole story about Safiyyah, the narrations which he himself also takes on board, talks about her having dreams of marrying an Arab chieftain, of a moon coming to her lap and marrying. She praised him. She stuck with him all the way through. Now there are examples of women. Exactly, he did not. I'm going to make it very explicit. He did not rape her. There was another example where he married a woman, and when he went to her, the woman said, "I seek refuge with God from you." Immediately he backed off, and he said, "You have accepted. You've taken refuge from the greatest of the Lord. I accept," and he divorced her straight away. So there are many examples of this. It was at that time she accepted it. What happened? She was a prisoner of war. She stuck with him. She praised him throughout their relationship, even before the relationship as well. So this is just some of the what I would say.
Can I reply to
all
that?
In context.
So he tried to give you the context.
Yes.
He tried to say that she was a slave, a prisoner of war, who ended up sticking with Muhammad and ended up praising him. What choice did she have? Her father had been killed, her brothers had been killed, her uncles had been killed. She was alone in the world. There is a well-known psychological condition, Stockholm Syndrome, which is when you have been with your captor for a very long time, you start to identify with your captor. Let me just read the source from the History of Al-Tabari, as published by the State University of New York Press, Volume 39, as translated by Ella Laudasseron. Ibn Umar, Kathir bin Zaid, Al-Walid bi Rabah, Abu Hurairah. While the Prophet was lying with Safiyyah, Abu Ayyub stayed the night at his door. When he saw the Prophet in the morning, he said, "God is the greatest." He had a sword with him, and he said to the Prophet, "O Messenger of God, this young woman has just been married, and you killed her father, her brother, and her husband. So I did not trust her." And you, Prophet, laughed and said, "Good." So in other words, imagine the scene. This poor woman has just seen that Muhammad had her father, her brother, and her husband killed. And now, powerless, defenseless, and with no allies, the man that has just killed her entire family wants to have sex with her. No woman watching this is going to take seriously the suggestion that she opened up her legs and went, "Yes, Muhammad, yes." That is completely ridiculous. This was a woman that was afraid, that was powerless, and that was a captive. And I can completely believe, after years and years and years of being raped by this man, night after night, that she did identify with him, and she did think of herself as one of his wives. But that is not how the story started. And ladies and gentlemen, the Muslims themselves were scared of what she might do to him because of what he did to her family. And what does that tell you about the context of the night of marriage? No, he's talking.
I'll say one more thing.
My camera's pointing there. I'm going to
No, hold on one second. You're not jumping into this conversation. Me and him. Right,
You're
no.
fabricating a lot of
Right, so he's. Are you running?
No, I'll say.
Right, you finish what you wanted to say. Finish what you wanted to say.
Bob, we don't run.
Finish what you wanted to say.
I reject that narration from Tabari. If you know Tabari, he narrates all his sources in the beginning of volume 1, in the introduction. He has the isnad of all of his sources for later scholars to critique. I completely reject that. Now, Prophet Muhammad never, ever forced himself on anybody. As the example I gave, where he went to a newlywed wife, she sought refuge, he backed off. And there are so many examples. He would never, ever do that. So the whole thing about him forcing himself is completely, we reject it, completely fabricated. Now I do bring it back to where your God instructs your people to not only massacre men, women, and children.
Sorry, my people, who are my people?
I said your God instructs. No, I said your people. I said your people.
Yes, you did.
You're the enemy. Okay. So your God instructed Moses to take the young women as sex slaves as well. There, pure instructions there. And then later on to Joshua.
Show me. Show me where it says take them as sex slaves.
Take them as slaves, the young women.
Kill all the young men.
Yeah.
Kill all the men.
You're desperate to get into this. I've said I'll debate you later.
Correct you.
Yeah, that's great sound bites, but we're going to talk about something else.
No, I'm going to talk
We're going to talk about something else.
No,
We're going to talk about Muhammad's other sins.
No.
We're going to talk about Muhammad's other sins, me and you.
We're going to talk about the lies of Bob. That's what we're going
Right, ladies and gentlemen, while he's finding the passage.
Numbers 31.
Right, go on. Where does it say sex slaves?
Hold on a second. So.
Where does it say have sex with them?
Where does it say?
That's what we're looking
Where
for.
does it say that Muhammad had sex?
Yeah, tell us that.
Hypocrisy.
I'll show you. I'll show you.
Show us where the word
I'm
sex
going to show you.
Moses told his men.
Yeah.
He told them to kill all the women.
Yes.
Who were not virgins, but to keep the women who were still virgins. Numbers 31.
He's not quoting the Bible.
I'll quote the Bible exactly.
That's the thing Moses did out of anger.
No,
Oh.
he's
okay,
not
fair
quoting the Bible. He's quoting Wikipedia.
enough. Numbers 31.
Bob, this.
It's Old Covenant. It's Old Covenant.
Well, okay. Just you said.
Numbers 31.
He's saying he's justifying it.
Right,
Fair
1 second. Numbers 31. Let's go to this. Just want to keep an eye on my Christian brother over there.
So-
This mic.
Moses was very angry with officers of the army. This 14. Okay?
Yeah.
Moses said to them, have you let the woman live? Behold, these cause problems. Therefore kill. And then
Well, let's go to the passage. Let's go to the
number
passage.
17.
Where are we going? Numbers 31 or number 17?
Numbers 31, verse 17.
Right, let's go there. 1 second.
Numbers 31.
No, numbers, yeah?
Numbers
Now, notice, ladies and gentlemen, how
Numbers.
they cannot defend Muhammad's behavior.
Alhamdulillah, we defended him.
They cannot defend Muhammad's behavior.
Congress to defend
They
him.
are giving no justification
21.
to what Muhammad did. They are simply
31.
trying to change the topic to the Bible.
No. We are comparing
And
it.
I want him to show me where any Christian has used Numbers 31 to practice sexual slavery.
Yes.
Show me. Which Christian
history.
did that?
Go through
Which
history.
Christian did that?
Go through history.
Yes, go on, show me one. You say yes, and you say go through history, so give me an example of a Christian king that established sex slavery, quoting Numbers 31.
Name one.
Name one.
If you go to America, I'm going to answer you. When you go to America, when they enslaved black people, they quoted the Bible to oppress them, to have sex with them. Fact. Ask any African American what was done to them, and they used the Bible to do it.
Right, so now let me correct him again.
Well,
Pick out, no, 1 second, you allowed him to jump in. Let me correct him again, because now I'm going to expose the lies of the Muslims against the Christians. The Bibles that the Christians in the southern states of America gave to their slaves were called slave Bibles. Go and Google that word. Slave Bibles, America.
They were still
The
Christians.
Bibles,
Christians
the
lied.
Bibles,
Christians
the
lied.
Bibles that were given to the slaves were deliberately edited.
Prove that.
To take verses, I will. To take verses out of the Bible
but let me
that can inspire the slaves to seek their freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, notice he's not even listening. So now I will prove it.
Numbers 30.
Now I will prove it.
No,
No, you allowed him to jump
Can
in.
we
He
finish
asked me to prove it, so now I'm going to prove it.
book of Exodus.
Now I'm going to prove it.
There's no
Right,
Exodus.
let me answer to this.
No, I'm going to prove it.
No, let me answer this now. Right?
So he didn't tell you that, did he?
No.
He didn't tell you
Right.
about how these Bibles were edited
Right.
because the slave owners were fearful that the Bible might inspire the slaves to pursue their freedom.
Right, so
He
now-
didn't tell you that.
So now, what Bob has proven is how Christians lie. How Christians...
All Christians,
They were Christians.
everywhere.
They were Christians who lied and who edited their Bible to enslave and have sex with black people. That is Christianity, I'm afraid. That is Christianity. And he has just proven it. He has just proven white Christians in America deliberately wrote slave Bibles to enslave black African people in the name of Jesus. That's what they did, in the name of Jesus. That's what he's trying to show to you. Bob's ancestors, who may have been slave owners, deliberately done this. There you go. What more evidence do you want?
Now let me prove it to you.
I know what they did.
Ladies and gentlemen,
It is irrelevant.
think about the logic.
Christians
Think
lie.
about the logic. Now he's triggered. He's forced his way into a discussion despite my objections.
I didn't
And now
force
he's
my way.
triggered because he doesn't want to let me speak.
Oh.
Think about the logic. The slave owners had to redact, edit and remove passages from the Bibles that they gave to their slaves.
They did it in their
Why
history.
did they
Edited,
do that,
edited.
ladies and gentlemen?
In their history.
Notice his
Edited
rudeness.
even today.
Notice how triggered he is that he can't let me speak.
Can you
What does that tell you about the Bible? It
Edited,
tells you about the
edited,
Bible
edited.
that the Bible inspires the liberation and the setting free of slaves. That's what it tells you about the Bible. And ladies and gentlemen, he created the Truman-Keown fallacy. What's the Truman-Keown fallacy? The Truman-Keown fallacy is when you say that the believer defines the religion and not the book. If I said Muslims are killing apostates because of the books of Islam, he would say that they're not following the book. He would say that they are ignoring the book. But yet, he has just reversed the logic when he is applying it to Christianity. He's saying that the Christians, not the Bible, defines the reality. Let me talk about the slave Bibles. What is notable about the slave Bible is not just its rarity, but its content, or rather, the lack of content. It excludes any portion of text that might inspire rebellion or liberation. Anthony Smith, an associate curator of the Bible and Religion in America at the museum, says it's the first instance of this abridged version. Now, I will interrupt this man whenever I please. But notice how he will complain about my interruptions, despite the fact you've all witnessed him interrupting me incessantly. He will now complain. Compare this to the surah of the Quran that says forbidden to you to have sex with are categories of women, but one of those that you can have sex with are the women that your right hands possess. The Quran legitimizes sex slavery, and that is what is in the Quran. And now I will show you in the Quran, because every time he calls me a liar, I am proving him wrong.
Never called him a liar.
Deuteronomy 22 verse 25, and I refute it. Deuteronomy 22.
Pull it up for me, bro. Pull it up for me.
I never called him a liar. That's a lie.
Go to that verse about the
No, you allowed him in. I'm now talking to him.
Which verse?
You gave up this conversation. You allowed him. I objected to him coming into this debate,
Excuse me.
and you let him in. I came in only once. Surah, right.
Because Bob
So,
was not telling the truth about Prophet Muhammad, and I refuse to stand here while he insults him at the level that he does, which shows, by the way, the unethical, the uncivilized mind of Bob.
Is it insulting to point out that someone took slaves? Is that an insult or a statement of fact?
You did go above.
It's a statement of fact.
Paul has
They are insulted
Christians
because
have slaves.
they're better than their prophet, and they themselves would not take slaves, which just goes to show that Muhammad is a ridiculous example to follow, and that we should be following Christ, who at a time when slavery was normal, never took a slave.
Who Christ enslaved people as God. You know, written in the whole Old Testament. Your God, Jesus, allowed slaves.
Where?
In the Old Testament.
Wow.
And don't give this
Numbers
nonsense.
31,
And-
we just said it.
Yeah, read it. And
So-
don't go on this thing about Old Covenant, New Covenant. If Jesus is God,
So, ladies and
he
gentlemen,
didn't know what he was talking
he
about.
asked me to show you from the Quran where Allah permits the taking of female sex slaves. Here it is. Are you listening? Those who have been wives of your sons proceeding from your loins, the two sisters in wedlock at one and the same time, except for what is past, for Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. He's giving a list of women you cannot have sex with.
Ask him.
Right? Surah 30, Surah 4, Ayah 24. And in Ayah 24 it goes on to say, also prohibited are women already married. Listen to the next words.
Right.
Except those your right hands possess.
Marrying them.
Your right hands possess
What
is an example of slavery.
Now let me answer this if he allows me. Let's read the verse. And forbidden to you are
Oh wait, are we not doing interruptions?
I thought you were finished, so I apologize. I thought you were finished.
Okay.
Let's start again.
So do we agree not to interrupt one another?
Yes, I thought you were finished.
Do you apologise for your earlier
I do
interruptions?
apologize.
All right.
But, right, now, let me read this. And forbidden to you are married women, except such as your right hand possesses. This has Allah enjoined on you, and allowed you are those beyond that, and you seek them by means of your property, marrying them. So in other words, the people in the right hand possess, you must marry them. So this is what Bob doesn't show you, that you marry them, right? That you marry them,
Not committing fornication.
and not committing fornication. This shows that Bob has lied to you, has deceived you. He has deliberately not shown you the truth about the Quran. So let me read it again, right?
Yes, let him read it again.
and-
He's just hung himself. He's just hung himself.
Alhamdulillah, right? And forbidden to you are married women, except such as your right hand possesses.
Yes, married women, except that your right hands
this
possess.
This has Allah enjoined on you, and allowed you, and those beyond that you seek them by means of your property. Marry them properly, and not committing fornication, and for the benefit you receive from them. Give them their dowries as fixed, and there is no blame on you what you do by mutual agreement after fixing the dowry. Surely Allah is all knowing.
Okay.
So where have I hung myself? This person,
I'm gonna tell him.
Bob, no, let me finish out. This person, Bob, has deceived you like Lucifer, right? Did not mention any of this to you. He said that he took them as sex slaves. Law, Quran does not say that. It says you must marry them properly, give them dowry, no fornication. Alhamdulillah.
Right, so now let me reply.
This proves Bob.
Let me reply. Let's read it carefully. Listen carefully.
How more careful can you read it?
Also prohibited are women already married. So Allah is saying that you can't have sex with women that are married. Right? We're all clear about that.
Where's sex
Oh,
coming into this?
stop interrupting.
Where's sex?
Stop interrupting.
Not in the Arabic.
Women already married, except those whom your right hands possess. So if a woman that is married, you possess, that means that Muhammad is sanctioning adultery. It gets worse, ladies and gentlemen. And then it goes on. Listen, thus hath Allah ordained against you prohibitions. So he's laying out boundaries. Except for these. Now, except for these means those that I mentioned earlier. So in other words, he's not talking about the same category of people. He's not talking about the ones that your right hands possess. It says, except for these, all others are lawful, provided you seek them in marriage. So in other words, what the Quran is actually saying is that all women, except for certain familial lines of marriage, and the slaves that you possess, are prohibited in marriage. But apart from those groups, anyone else you can marry. That's actually what the text is saying. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is not that I am lying to you, it is him that's lying to you. I'll read it again. Thus Allah hath ordained prohibitions against you, except for these. In other words, those that I was talking about earlier, all others are lawful, provided you seek them in marriage. So in other words, it doesn't include the ones that your right hands possess. I'm not playing fast and loose with a text. He is playing fast and loose with a text.
Bob, give the reference.
No.
So there, look.
So what?
Except for these, all others.
It's the same one you read.
Yes, all others.
So let me now correct Bob.
It's not in the Arabic.
No. First of all, he does not know Arabic.
Do you?
Yes, I know Arabic, alhamdulillah. Right? Okay? Sex is not mentioned in the Arabic. This is a deliberate teasing lie. And let me read it again to you. Now, maybe Bob, and forgive me, Bob, for saying this, but maybe Bob needs a lesson in the English language. Okay? So let's read it from the Quran in the English language. Right? And forbidden to you are married women. Pretty understandable. Except such as your right hand possesses.
So there's the adultery.
Right? No.
There's the adultery.
This has this about what your hand for what your right hand possesses. This is about this.
Those that are married, that your right hands possess.
No.
There's the adultery.
You said you wouldn't interrupt.
But you interrupted me.
No, I did interrupt you.
You did.
I fulfilled my promise. Right?
Okay, no interruption from now on.
Right?
No,
I had my
he
camera
interrupted
there.
me. He can't complain if I interrupt.
And forbidden to you are married women, except such as your right hand possesses. That means they're allowed to you. Right? This has
go for it.
died on you and allowed you are those beyond that. That if you seek them by means of your property, meaning the slaves, right, marry them. Your property, meaning those who are in your right hand possesses, marry them properly, right, and not committing fornication. That means you cannot have sex with them. You must marry them.
Giving the dowry as well.
And the dowry. So Bob, I'm sorry, either he doesn't understand English, which is obvious he doesn't, and he certainly doesn't understand Arabic, right? So this proves that those slaves of war, the same as the Old Testament, those slaves of war were allowed to marry. They must be married. They had to be married. There was no fornication allowed with them. This is the actual what the Quran says. And so unfortunately, Bob is lying to you again. It's in English. If you want to, I can show you in Arabic as well.
Okay, so ladies and
So
gentlemen.
as you can see, Bob has lied. This is the Quran. I've read it to you. It's chapter 4. You can read it for yourselves, and you can come back and ask Bob why he needed to lie.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear who is lying. Read the verse again. It says.
1,000 times.
Oh, there you go interrupting.
Right, read this. Here.
There you go interrupting. There you go
I'm giving you my
interrupting.
Quran to read.
Surah 4, ayah 24. Right? Let's just read it in its full context. Right? It starts in 23. Prohibited to you for marriage. So he's talking about who you can't marry. Or your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, your fathers, your mother's sisters, brothers' daughters, sisters' daughters, foster's mothers, foster sisters, your wives, your mothers, your stepdaughters under you, guardianship, born of your wives to whom you have gone in. No prohibition if you have gone in. Those who have been wives of your sons, proceeding from your loins, and two sisters. So it is talking about sex. Because it's talking about those that you go into.
The Quran,
It is talking about those that you go into. The concept of marriage is connected to sex in Islam. That's true for Christianity, it's true for Islam. It goes on. Wives of your sons, proceeding from your loins, and two sisters in wedlock at one and the same time, except for what is past, for Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. Then it introduces a break. It introduces a clause. It introduces a new section. It says also prohibited. So in other words, we're not talking about the earlier group. We're now talking about a new group. Also prohibited are women already married. Except, so now it's introduced a new group. And the new group are those that your right hands possess. So in other words, these are married women that Muhammad is sanctioning sex with. Or at best, sanctioning marriage with, which means that Muhammad is sanctioning adultery in the Quran. Now notice the interruption. It goes on.
Thank you. That's what I was asking.
Thus hath Allah ordained prohibitions. So in other words, it's talking about what He's already done. The prohibitions against you. And then it says these words, except for these. So in other words, we're now not talking about the same group of people that we were previously talking about. We're now talking about a new group of people. So except for these, and then emphatically it says, all others are lawful, provided ye seek them in marriage. So therefore, it is not me that is lying about what the Quran is saying. It is him that is lying about what the Quran is saying.
Bob, I got the
Bob,
there's a commentary on that bit.
Yeah.
You can have it if you
You're
want
going
to.
in circles. Let the listeners just read the passage. It's very clear. Bob is introducing his own reading, his own interpretation. Now he's going to bring us ancient commentaries that we don't accept.
Yeah, I just want to read an ancient commentary, a classical commentary. Allah forbids Muslims to marry women who are already married, except slave girls. Ibn Kathir explains that Muslim men are prohibited from marrying women who are already married, with one notable exception: those whom you acquire through war. For you are allowed such women after making sure that they are not pregnant. Imam Ahmed recorded that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said, we captured some women from the area of Atwaz who were already married, and we disliked having sexual relations with them because they were already had husbands. So we asked the Prophet about the matter, and this ayah was revealed. Consequently, we had sexual relations with the women. Their husbands were alive. That is rape. It is not marriage.
Okay, so here's the complete distinct thing. It explicitly says marry them.
Of women who were married.
Hey.
Of women who were married.
Our turn. Explicitly says. Bob has read the text.
The Critical Quran by Robert Spencer. Oh my God. This man is so ignorant. When I debated with him, he has no knowledge of the Quran whatsoever. You're using this guy as your source?
No, I'm using Ibn Kathir and Abu Sa'id. I'm quoting classical Muslim commentators.
Either way, Bob is...
And you're embarrassed by it.
No, I'm not embarrassed.
You're embarrassed by it.
Hang on. You see?
So is it right to have sex with married women?
Now, let me tell you something.
Answer that question.
marry them.
Is it right to have sex with women who are already married? Is it right to have sex with women who are already married? Because the Quran is saying you can. That's adultery, and these women would not consent, and that's why it's rape.
Now, Bob, can I say something? And you won't interrupt.
David commit adultery? Is David a
Right.
moral example?
Firstly,
is he a moral example?
Is he not a
for
prophet?
Christians?
Did David commit adultery and was he forgiven?
No, don't irrelevant.
Are you talking?
Firstly, let me read it again. Because Bob is twisting and influencing his own opinion on these verses, as they do with the Bible, as the four authors of the Gospels did. Right?
He's trying to change the subject, ladies and gentlemen.
No. You see,
Wants to change the subject.
What Bob is, no, I'm not changing the subject. I'm giving a similarity. Right? That's what you do when you have dialogue. Right? First of all, this book of Spencer, who is uneducated, you can turn around, young man. You're not young enough to understand it. You're old enough to understand.
He's allowed to hold it if he wants
he
to.
Can hold it. He's been sarcastic, right? Okay, that's your training as a Christian. God help you, right? So
He's just holding a Quran. Why are you attacking him?
When you do this,
all he's doing is holding a Quran. Isn't that what you did when I was talking? He's criticizing you for doing what he did to me when I was talking. He held up a big passage and held it up there while I was talking.
Right.
So he's now criticizing you for doing his behavior. So he's criticizing himself.
Point taken. Point taken.
We don't need to be slapping. We don't need to be slapping. We don't need to be slapping.
That's affection. Right.
These are not slap. These are not affections. This is a sign of frustration. I know you're losing the argument, but calm down.